for each one of them. First up, we have Rebekah, historian, who is also a curator of religion and community history in the Chicago History Museum. Rebekah, give us a wave. Excellent. We've got Raquel Flores-Clemons, head of the Chicago Public Library's Vivian G. Harsh Research Collection. It's the largest African-American history and literature collection in the Midwest. All right, Raquel, wave at us. Hello. We also have Victor Salvo, the executive director of the Legacy Project, which celebrates the contributions of LGBTQ people to world history and culture. Hello, Victor. And our moderator for this section is McDonald, president and CEO of Landmarks Illinois, which is a leading voice for preservation needs in the city of Chicago. All right, we're about to get started. Bonnie, take it away. Thank you for your insights today. We welcome you all.
All right, thank you very much, Sarah. Good afternoon, everyone. How are you doing? We are the after lunch session, which is always extra pressure. So we have an incredible panel, though, today to talk with you about preservation in a different sense than you might have heard it before. Because some people, when we conjure the idea of historic preservation, think of buildings. But what we really do is we're providing a space to ensure people's stories are told, people's cultural histories are preserved. And that is what we're going to focus on today with our three incredible panelists. We're so honored to be here today to talk about this, but we want to invite you at the end of the panel to ask us any questions from the conversation today. So please, there's a notebook in your bag that you can write questions. We will have 15 minutes at the end to answer questions about the work that our panelists are doing, which is phenomenal. I think you're going to want to ask them more, but also about how you can get involved in this work, how you can start your own projects to preserve cultural history, social history, neighborhood history, as well as ensuring if you have questions about historic preservation as a whole, we're here to answer that. So let's get started because we have a number of questions we want to get through today to ensure that we tell the full story of this conversation, and then we're excited to talk to you. So hello, panelists. How are you? All right, well, it's wonderful to see you. And we wanted to begin today by asking a pretty broad question about when you think historic preservation or preservation, what does that mean to you? So I would like to begin, Raquel, are you ready? Right. Raquel is, as you heard in the introduction, works quite with archival information and documentation, which is something that has a deep history, a fraught history, and I'd love to hear what do you think when you think preservation?
Well, okay, well, hello. So I would like to begin the answer by kind of centering myself and my professional identity. So I identify as a Black woman first, and I bring that identity into everything that I do, including preserving historical documentation of the culture from which I'm from, and also that is meaningful and impactful beyond just the culture itself. I'm also an archivist, although I'm identified as a librarian in Chicago Public Library, but I am an archivist, and that means that I'm responsible for collecting, documenting, organizing, and providing access to information and to, in the case of being the head of the Vivian G. Harsh Research Collection, to what I like to call city assets and a national treasure. And so when I think about historic preservation, it's of course preserving and protecting and keeping safe the actual physical materials and the primary resources that tells the story of Black people locally and statewide, as well as the national imprint of the local community here. But also too, it's about that access piece and activating those materials to bring people to a better or closer, more accurate history, right? We can never really fully have complete accuracy because we have so many stories to tell from different vantage points, even within a community, and identifying the community is not a monolith. But knowing that we have to bring all the stories and narratives to the table and being very intentional about the silences. Who is not there, whose story is not being represented, even within the Black community and the story of the local Black community. And so that's what preservation means to me, not only the physical protection of the materials, but really, connecting the community, not only the Black community, but the city community and nationally, because this archive that I have the great privilege of stewarding serves a national community as well. We get many researchers from all over the place, and one thing that I'm very passionate about is making sure that the local community understand that these are your resources, first and foremost, because these materials tell the story of the community here in the city. And so, and being very intentional about identifying the systems at play that silenced voices, being willing to trouble the narrative, and being really intentional about making those systems have a less pronounced voice, and really trying to elevate and really activate those voices that are not always pronounced. So that's what it means to me.
That's an excellent framing for preservation in a sense of story keeping as well. And if I may, Victor, I'd love to ask you the same question. I think Raquel has opened the door to the project you're working on. When you think of preservation, do you think of story keeping?
Well, the stories of LGBTQ contributions to world history and culture have been largely redacted from shared human history. There are many people that young folks learn about today where that single sentence in the biography has been removed for a variety of reasons. And our mission is to put that one sentence back into the biography that was so important somebody else thought it had to be left out. So when it comes to telling our stories, because we do focus on world history and culture, it is an international and multicultural installation, and I'm referring to the Legacy Walk, which is an outdoor museum of bronze memorials on North Halsted Street. I guess we'll get into that a little bit more later, but the purpose of it is really because the LGBTQ community, unlike so many other cultural core constituencies, does not have within it a natural or how can I put this? We don't have the mechanisms for intergenerational memory transfer, which is a fancy way of saying there are no gay grandpas regaling their grandchildren with what things were like back in the gay old days. Those stories are not shared within a natural cultural context because LGBTQ people are born in what I refer to as a reverse diaspora. We are scattered to the wind to begin with, where we're very often the only person who is not heterosexual and not cisgender in our families, and we have to come together in space and time to create community where there may not have been one prior to that time. So our role is really by casting our stories in bronze, and I'm talking about people like Alan Turing and Josephine Baker and Jane Addams, Cole Porter, Tchaikovsky. There's a whole slew of them if you go on our website. It's about casting those stories in bronze and placing them out there on a city street where younger people can go and see them and read about them and learn things that they're so far not really going to learn in school. Now, the dynamic has changed slightly since in 2019, working with our partners at Equality Illinois, Illinois Safe Schools Alliance, and Public Health Institute in Metropolitan Chicago, we wrote and successfully lobbied for and passed the Illinois State LGBTQ inclusive curriculum mandate that requires the inclusion of LGBTQ narratives in all public school education for K through 12. Thank you. The Legacy Project is the architect of that curriculum, and it resides as a subsite on our website that teachers can access anywhere in the state, as well as obviously from outside of the state of Illinois. And our website gains an average of 77,000 hits a month. The only thing that's actually changed is the fact that we now are the repository for age-appropriate K through 12 curriculum. So the idea of sharing these narratives, really, it's a heavier lift for LGBTQ people because many of the support systems that exist elsewhere are not automatically open to us. Thanks to people like yourself, that is beginning to change, and on an institutional level, that is becoming much more widely accessible. But when you're talking about young school kids, they're still at a very formative point in their lives, and for most of them, they learn nothing about people like themselves who are like themselves, while at the same time enduring epithets thrown at them in the hallways of their schools. So it's a really critical piece of youth development, self-esteem, and anti-bullying to make sure that this particular information is available to not only provide a cultural context for those kids who are growing up and into their identities now, but also for society at large, because bullying, whether it takes place in the classroom or takes place on the news or takes place in the House of Representatives, is all a result of ignorance. And the one thing that we seek to do is to demystify this notion that LGBTQ people just popped out of nowhere and suddenly became a contemporary aberration and a problem that everybody else has to deal with. We have been around for thousands of years and have made unimaginable contributions that have truly defined the way human beings interact with each other. So the idea of placemaking and storytelling and memory and education is very central to our work.
I think that's a phenomenal entry. Yes.
Thank you.
This work is about people's lives. That's what we're talking about. We make it into something academic, but it's about people's lives. And I think Victor helped us enter into another, we want to get into some of the details of the projects that you work on. So I'd like to begin with Rebekah, because something you just said, Victor, so important, intergenerational memory transfer, because there are some of our elders who don't feel comfortable sometimes telling our histories, and in many cultures, women are culture keepers as well. They're those that are telling stories. But what's interesting about Rebekah's project she's here to talk about, A Key in Chicago, is that it was young people ensuring the transfer of knowledge. Can you tell us more about A Key in Chicago?
Absolutely, and thank you to both of you for those very profound introductions to what preservation work is. I feel like I'd have little to add to those amazing definitions. So just a quick intro into how I entered the A Key in Chicago project. I'm the curator of religion and community history, which every time I say those words out loud, I'm like, yeah, it's as big as expansive as you think those two words could be. So that means I work across a number of initiatives at the museum. And so I first want to highlight the work of my colleague, Elena Gonzalez, who is our curator of civic engagement and social justice. She's the lead curator of our A Key project. And so she's really been spearheading this effort even before I joined the museum in May of last year. And so if we can give a round of applause to Elena, who couldn't be here. It's just phenomenal. But yes, to really speak to that, so our museum is a very old cultural institution. We started in the 1850s, and so with that comes a number of legacies that you can imagine we need to unpack and disrupt, and a lot of things that speak into what we do and do not preserve in the stories of memory. And so in 2019, there were a group of high school students from Rulli Lozano Leadership Academy who came to the Chicago History Museum on a school field trip, expecting to learn about Chicago history, and did not see themselves in any of our gallery spaces in a meaningful way. And they took action. They protested us, they called us out on social media, they said, you need to do better. I want to say that's what we're trying to do, right? Trying is an operative word there, in that undoing legacies that are centuries old takes time, but I really commend Elena's valiant effort in leading this project. And so through that, that means a number of different ways of activating those memories, but really centering it through students, saying, hey, you can be 16 and hold adults to account, absolutely. And so that's really centering their voice, their activism, their fortitude to say, you know, a big institution doesn't scare us and we can do this. And we kind of call them our guides through the project. And so that's carried through in a number of ways, including paid internships with high school students who help us activate, curate, investigate, find these stories within our own archives, as well as around the city. Because in order for us to share those stories in the gallery spaces, we need to be reciprocal. We need to be in community as we're doing this work. So yeah, that's a brief introduction to A Key, but only.
We could talk all hour about one of these projects, so just to say we're going to do our best. And I wanted to say appreciation to Rebekah for being here to call out the important role that young people play in ensuring that our memories are kept, but also that we create equitable spaces as well and recognize the trauma that history has caused. I'm just going to, for a moment, speak about my civic engagement. I think why I was asked to be here is I co-chaired the Chicago Monuments Project, which was really on account of Shy Nation, a young group of indigenous activists who were protesting the Columbus Monument and really forced the city to think about the entirety of its artworks and how we're creating space for people, or they're not seen, or founding narratives in our monuments. So I think about that because monuments are tied up in how we tell history and who decides what history is told. And Raquel, I want to come back to you because we have now over half of the states in what is considered the United States now that are determining how we tell history and who has the right to tell history. So with your work, can you talk about the importance of having the research, the documentation, all of the projects that you work on?
Yeah, it is critical because, and I am probably badly paraphrasing Hakeem Madhubuti, Chicago poet, national poet, but I've heard him say, if you don't name your history, if you don't claim your history, somebody else will. And that is pretty important to the work of preserving history because we are history. We are a walking archive. I've been doing this work intentionally and involved in this work since 2008, but really much we are involved in, our lives and our community and, keeping those histories and knowledges of our community. I often say I co-pilot with community. I don't like to go into communities and extract. I want to come in and work alongside of community members because you are the expert of your lives, you are the expert of your community in that development. And so one way in which the work that I'm doing at Chicago Public Library is supporting that is that I had the great honor of co-authoring a grant. We received a $2 million grant through the Mellon Foundation to elevate and to provide even greater access to our materials. And that will look like supporting processing our materials as well as digitizing some of them so they can be readily available and accessible. And really the critical piece of this is to support the learning of Black history for a new generation of K-12 learners. And so that work will happen in various ways, but we will intentionally connect with educators to provide those resources so that information can get into the classroom and get into the classroom to the young minds that will eventually lead, right? And so that's important because if you provide the evidence and provide the information for students to engage with in themselves and have the intentionality of educators to provide that information and to incorporate it into their curriculum, you can't, children will call you out on it, right? And that's also with empowering someone when you have access to the evidence that this thing happened, or the evidence to say this happened, but my vantage point of my community isn't there. And so, that's, it's critically important that we provide that information, those tools to our young folks and push against, those who would say that this history is not important or it shouldn't be told or that it's not relevant, because that's really what it is. And we all know what that really means. It's a silence of particular voices. It's a silence of narratives that make others feel uncomfortable. But also, too, my job is not to necessarily make people feel comfortable in telling a more accurate account of history.
Raquel, could you name, you are involved with multiple projects, and I want you to be able to look up this incredible work. So can you talk about the Vivian Harsh collection, Blackivists?
Oh, yes. Wow, sure. Well, taking off my CPL hat. So I'm also the co-founder of a Black archival collective called the Blackivists. We too, before my time working at CPL, we also received a grant from Mellon to support community archiving and engagement projects. We worked with several community organizations to help them, again, come alongside, co-pilot with them to preserve their various histories. I had the great honor of working with AltSpace, which is an art collective on the West Side that, rest in peace, John Bills, and also co-founded by John Bills and Jordan Campbell, where they are using their art to really, again, activate change through art, and also they were documenting, photographing various aspects of the Austin community to help fill in the gaps of documenting that particular area. We worked with several several organizations with that grant, but the whole point is really just to be a resource to the community. I also sit on various boards in the city. It comes with the work. It's the nature of the work. Right. But I am the vice chair of the Black Metropolis Research Consortium, which is a consortium of various academic institutions as well as what we call second spaces, so smaller cultural heritage organizations who are doing the very intentional work of preserving Black history and culture locally, and so I have the great honor of serving on that board as well. But yes, various projects that I'm doing. It's just
so
the
Raquel
nature of the work.
doesn't sleep much, as you can tell.
Yeah, I get my 6 hours.
Another person, when you learn all of the work that Victor has done, we certainly want to hear about the Legacy Walk, the Legacy Project. I want to take just a moment to pause to recognize when you think traditionally preservation, there is a space in Chicago that I just want to call out. There's a National Historic Landmark in Chicago called the Henry Gerber House that I encourage you to learn about. Henry Gerber was an early gay rights activist. He started the first gay rights organization in the United States here out of Chicago, and he was arrested for his work publishing a newsletter with the Society for Human Rights that he started. So that you would walk past this place and never know the history within it. So I just want to say, Victor, within that, you could walk past places and never know the history of LGBTQAI+ communities because that was often hidden intentionally. It wasn't safe to share. So can you talk about the Legacy Walk as naming that history, visualizing it?
Certainly, Gerber is not yet on the Legacy Walk, but he is in the database, so feel free to go to legacyprojectchicago.org, Henry Gerber, and you can learn all about him. The Legacy Walk, which is basically a mile-long installation, and thanks, honestly, to the Chicago Landmarks Commission, was declared a historic landmark in 2019, is the only space of its kind on Earth. It's also the largest physical site on Earth ever to be declared a historic landmark because of its significance to LGBTQ people. And it contains, at any point in time, 40 bronze memorials, which are celebrating every facet of our community across the span of several hundred years. And that includes Two-Spirit people, it includes Frida Kahlo. I could just go on and on about the examples. But the point behind the walk is that most of our history, you were talking about if you don't take control of your own history, our history has been denied to our own community. So everyone, not just straight people, but gay people grow up never learning that people like them did anything that's important. So the walk becomes a tremendous revelation because they are reading about people like Jane Addams and such and connecting the dots and going, wow, I had no idea. And the stories are obviously very compelling and very inspirational, and we derive strength from the fact that families now come, parents bring their children to it. We work directly with CPS and a variety of school districts as well as schools and districts outside of the state of Illinois so that during the school year, school groups come by bus to take a tour of the Legacy Walk. And every person on the walk is already integrated into the education system, and it's digitally accessible from the walk itself. So between the walk, which is the permanent installation, the Legacy Wall, which is the traveling installation, that has been to 51 cities in the United States and has been seen by over 500,000 people since 2017. Both installations are digitally linked to the education program, so you can bring up the lesson plans, the videos, all the resources supporting that person, everything in real time while you're interacting with the actual thing. So it ends up becoming this sort of sensory overload because not only do people not know, many people don't even know that it's there. They could be leaning on one of the pylons, which I know there's probably some pictures that are there over there. You could be leaning on one of the pylons on Halstead Street and ask somebody about the Legacy Walk, and they would have no idea what you're talking about, even though they're literally standing next to it, because it is so unique that it doesn't register with a lot of people, though I've always said, honestly, that smokers are the most educated people because it gives them something to look at while they're outside. But it's the fact that we're next to Wrigley Field is also really cool because the people who stop there are the straight folks wearing the Cubs garb walking to Wrigley Field. And they're just like, huh, and it's one of those things where it's so message positive, and it really is about the fact that no matter what community you're from, there are LGBTQ people in it. So in terms of intersectionality, it really is, it reinforces like diversity, equity, inclusion efforts. Corporations will bring the legacy wall into their space because all of their employees will come down and look at the wall thinking they're just gonna look at a wall that's like about gay history, and what they're looking at is a wall that's about all these different aspects of human history, and it's filled with people who look like them, who just happen to be LGBTQ. And that's the kind of message that we're trying to bring into it. Certainly we have our own perspectives. Every community has its own perspectives and a different lens through which to look at these lives. But for young kids who don't ever learn anything about this, it is actually kind of a lifeline for them. And we've heard some incredibly compelling stories, and I'm thrilled that parts of the state have really embraced the curriculum. I was really surprised just looking at the user data on the website that the Central Illinois and Peoria are the #1 users of the Illinois inclusive curriculum. That is mind-boggling to me. And that the very first tour that came when we started doing tours in 2012 drove 3 hours from Southern Illinois to come and see it. And this is the kind of thing where I encourage you all, if you have an opportunity, to go there and physically see it. It's impressive, it's beautiful, I'm very proud of it. It took many years. It actually took 25 years from the day it was conceived to the day it was dedicated in 2012. But it really comes down to, I always think about George Orwell's quote, those who control the past control the present, those who control the present control the future. And if young people are denied the fact that they have any relevance in society, that they've ever done anything that mattered to anybody, they become disposable when they're adults. They become easy to marginalize, to make into other. And that's the reason why it's really incumbent upon all communities to invest the resources that are necessary to make sure that their stories are told and that people understand why they matter. And we just struggle because even the people who write the checks themselves are victims of the education that denied them. So it's like, I always tell folks, if I told everybody I worked in pediatric cancer, they would know exactly what I was talking about. You say LGBTQ contributions to world history and culture, and there's just sort of a blank because that has been so thoroughly removed. So again, the fact that we passed the curriculum within 2 weeks of getting landmark status, actually made 2019 a banner year, immediately followed by COVID, thank you very much. But it actually helped do a real reset for the organization and it elevated us in the consciousness, and it's actually given, I don't want to say given us credibility because we had credibility beforehand, but it's given us a position of authority from which to speak about this. And it's been a real privilege to actually see the material being used. And especially in this political climate right now, which to your point, there are those who want to obviously ban books. If it has even the slightest positive thing about an LGBTQ person in it, they don't want it. They would have no trouble if the book was totally anti-gay. I can assure you of that. But it's only because it's a positive message. And we ourselves are going into textbook publishing next year in 2024. Our first book is coming out. Thank you. And that's an elementary school reader for grades 3 through 5. And I have to tell you, it's got Lambda Literary Award written all over it. This book is going to be spectacular. But I also expect it to be banned by people who will never crack it open to read it. But that's the kind of reality that we're butting up against. And I think that anything that we can do to be able to share these stories and certainly be able to have access to a forum like this to talk to folks is really important because the stories are really, really interesting. And it does give you a sense of, wow, we kind of are all in this together.
You're bringing up something paramount, which is who decides. So who decides what history we're going to tell and the layers that are going to be revealed in the work that we do. So I wanted to reference the space that we're in briefly to frame our next question. So this is the Epiphany, now called the Epiphany Center for the Arts. It was the Epiphany Church before this. And to look around, this is a designated resource, i.e. officially recognized as a significant historic resource. What you don't see are the other layers of history. You can't see the layers of history necessarily other than the paint sort of coming off the wall. But recently, my colleague Layla Wills, who is with the Historical Preservation Society of the Illinois Black Panther Party, went to the officials who decide what we're going to tell, what history we're going to tell in a place, because this building is also associated with the Illinois Black Panther Party. This was called the People's Church. It was where the Black Panther Party met. And it's part of the history, but was not included in the official record of why this building is important. And she had to go and get it officially added to that narrative. So I think that that's wholly problematic in the institutions who decide what is historic and what is not. So I want to turn to Rebekah, because this was a question with Aki in Chicago about how the institution decides to tell history. What are the role of institutions in this process?
That's a very good question. Yeah, I mean, again, getting called out wholeheartedly for saying a third of your city is not represented in something for a city, hugely problematic, right? And I should speak, so they mentioned in my bio that I'm an architectural historian by training, but my area of interest is adaptive reuse and intangible heritage for exactly this question of how do we activate these spaces, because what you see is not the history. And so I'm so grateful for that framing of even the space we're in. And I think it's a really good metaphor for the work that we have to do to really say, okay, Chicago is a Latina city, full stop. If that's not reflected, then we're just not looking in the right places. We're not uncovering these layers. And so to do that, yes, we need to mine our own resources. That means looking in our own archive. But that also means a lot of relationship building and a lot of just humbly accepting that we have not been doing the work right and we need to do it differently. And so I give Elena incredible foresight for how she's envisioned we build these relationships. And so we have, councils of advisors, as well as what we call our awareness council. So that's paid mentors who meet regularly with us, but then also just a general body of folks who are really connected, embedded in their communities to say, hey, this is a diverse population of folks in the city. Yes, they identify as Latina, but that means lots of things intersectionally, and we want to make sure each of those is a part of this project and that they feel like they are seen when we move forward. You'll also hear that I said project. So this is an exhibition that is set to open in fall of 2025, but it's not meant to be something that you just see on a wall in 2025 and then never see again. This is wholeheartedly saying, we have not been doing the work and we need to do it ongoing. So what does that look like? And so part and parcel of that is thinking about sustainability, thinking about, okay, we can say, we've engaged somebody. What does that actually mean to engage somebody? What does it mean to build relationship? What does it mean to be in community? We're a museum that you would call public history, and I have that blessing of having community in my title. So what is public versus what is community? They sound similar, but they mean very different things when you really think about it. And so I think a lot of the work we're doing, yes, in a key, but really as a model going forward for how we engage in all our work, is thinking about these sustainable issues, these issues of how we're framing, not framing, engaging, not engaging, and being led by the people we say we represent. And that's really, really crucial.
Would either of you, Raquel, you work for an institution as well. Is there any comment you would like to make?
Can you slightly repeat the question, please?
Of course. The question is, I think, the role of people to determine how to tell their own history and how problematic it can be when institutions are given the power to decide that.
Yeah. So I'm in an interesting position as a city employee. Full stop. So one thing that's unique and is a benefit to the organization which I'm in is that we are a public organization. Like, we have to operate, supporting the public good, providing access to resources because your money pays for it, okay? And I want you to be empowered by that. So that's one aspect of it. And then also too, in my role as the head of this unit, this collection itself, specifically the Harsh, was started by Vivian Harsh, who was one of Chicago's first Black librarians. She was the first Black librarian to open up a branch, the Historic Hall branch. And that branch was specifically developed to provide resources to a growing Black population, growing Black migrant population from the South, coming to the city, and she and others in the community advocating for a space and a place and resources for that community. And so she operated in her role as an employee, as a public employee, to make sure that the resources she had was being reinvested into the community, whether it was coming from the funds were coming from, the city government, or as she did, she actually, she actually, got funds. She went and got funds from the Rosenwald Foundation to develop this collection. So with that being said, I always say, again, we are a city asset and a national treasure. And I really want you all to chew on that word, because it is an asset, is a benefit, is a value to you as the public and as the community, but also to that, myself, I don't think that I'm the expert on all the things. I'm going to go to the community and engage with the community to help make those decisions. Yes, I'm in this position where I do make some final decisions, but I also have to make those decisions in alignment with, policies and regulations of the city. I'm just not out there doing it haphazardly, but also always with the community in mind. And so that is supported by some policies and such, but also that's just a personal way that I operate.
Yes, yes. Well, thank you. We are at lightning round, everybody. So just to let you know, we have about 2 minutes to our open question and answer. So please be thinking about what questions you'd like to ask. But in the roughly 2 minutes that we have, I'm going to ask our panelists to give their top 3 things. So if you wanted to engage in the work that they are doing, or if they would like to give advice about how you can start your own cultural heritage preservation project, what advice would they give? So 3 things. Victor, go.
Gather all of your supporters around you before you start, and really do the due diligence to consult with all the potential stakeholders and take the time to do it. I worked for 2 years on interviewing people across the state at every different level of community engagement, from the governor through the mayor to the state representatives to the business leaders to the hardcore activists from every community, because it's number one, it's a way to build allies to your cause, and number 2, it's a way to start your mailing list so that you have people to reach out to once you actually begin to do the work. So that would be the one thing, get those folks around you. And also don't be afraid to tap into those who have some resources to spare to help get you going. We started with nothing, $400 on a coffee table. We've raised millions of dollars, but we started out with no endowment and no nothing. Don't be afraid to do that. If you truly believe in what you do and you have people who believe in you, they will support you. And the last thing is, go buy the books. We had to go get the permits. We had to meet with folks. We had to do what had to be done. There couldn't be some magical exception to us because we were gay and we're so downtrodden. We actually had to do what everybody else had to do. And if you don't know how to do that, learn. Because that's going to be the way you're going to gain the respect of all the people that you have to work with.
And quickly, is there one thing people can do to get involved with the Legacy Project?
Just go to our website and ask for more information, or fill out the volunteer form, and we will get in touch with you, trust me. Or you can make a donation, absolutely.
Very good. Raquel, what would you, 3 things, how can they get involved or prepare?
I'm going to respectfully pass it to you and then come back to me, because I talked right before Victor.
Okay. 3 things, my goodness. One is think about the thing you lose sleep over and see if you can figure out how you want to solve that. I would say that might be true and a key for many folks, and I know for my own work professionally, it took a long time to figure out how to solve the piece of the thing I was losing sleep over, but it's the thing that keeps me going. And so, that can be representation around a lot of things and engaging community around a lot of things. The second thing is we have this phrase where we say, don't let the best be the enemy of the good. And that's like, just start. You will mess up, you will get it wrong, you will humbly say, I'm so sorry I tried and it still wasn't my best effort. But at least, along the way you learn the right steps, you get the right people engaged, but literally just start, show up. And the third thing, I guess, I'm thinking about what you said about resources, allies, and building folks, but also just asking for help gets you really far sometimes. So you may not know what you need, but if you show up and you say, this is what I'd like to do, are you willing to give me 5 minutes to talk about it? You'd be surprised how generous people can be, especially when they understand your mission. So I think when you're really driven by that thing you're losing sleep over, people see it and they care too, and just don't be afraid to do it. And to get engaged with the key. So we have a website now, and so there's a QR code and there's a form you can fill out, and you can learn more about the work there. And we do things like community collecting workshops, we do awareness events. There's a whole number of things coming up, so yeah, please check out the website for that.
Really quickly, adding to what was already said, start with yourself and then start with the eldest person in your community. So you know, everyone has some type of device. You have a recording mechanism. Record yourself. Also to properly document it, meaning your social media is not an archive. It is not. I think we all learned that lesson, what was that, a couple of years ago when Facebook went black. It is not an archive. So get that stuff off your phone, off your devices, get it on an external hard drive, save it on the cloud. Seriously, I've seen people lose a swath of wealth of information on their own cultural and work production because they just didn't follow those simple things. But start with yourself. Start to write down, record yourself, get to journaling again about your experiences, because archives are built because of the lives of people. And so start with yourself and then start with the elders in your community and quickly. We are losing a lot of our elders, especially from the civil rights era, and a lot of your histories are in your minds, you know, is in your collective memory. So get that out, get it recorded somehow. And yeah, I would just say, just get started. It really is that simple. Get started in some way. Don't get caught up in it being perfect. Just get started. And then, you know, tap into your local resources like the Chicago Public Library. We have 3 archival repositories. Harsh is one of 3 units of the Archives and Special Collections Division. And we hold materials that tell various stories of life in Chicago. And there's still way more stories to tell. There's a lot of stories that are not represented. And so one way you can get involved is just to connect with us and visit one of your archival repositories locally, in CPL, or just, you know, in the city. And in terms of getting involved, particularly at the Harsh or any of the archival repositories, go to the programs, you know, visit any exhibits that are happening. We currently have a traveling exhibitor, Brunetta Howell-Barrett, who is a force, and she's still kicking, 91, and has a great story. She was a part of her Washington administration, did so much great work, protests at the polls, all these good things. We have it. We have her papers, and we have a traveling exhibit throughout the branches to connect that history to the communities, especially in which she was a part of and worked in. So just support the programs, and yeah, just come see us.
Thank you all. And for you to know, please visit the Blackavists. It is the Blackavists website.
Yes, that's my non-CPL.
Yes.
Non-CPL. Yes, visit the Blackavists to learn more about that work, and then also to just check out our resources for CPL.
Yes.
Check out our resources on the CPL website.
Well, I wanted to say there's an excellent guide on the Blackavist website, the 5 things to think about when you're considering donating your stories.
That's a great resource too, just some things to consider in terms of what that means when you transfer over materials to a repository. There's a lot of things that people don't realize. That's why I'm intentionally using asset. It becomes an asset of an organization oftentimes. So
perfect. Well, with that in mind, we'd love to hear from you. So first question right in the front. Get started.
Hi. My name is Robert Castillo. Hi, Victor. I'm glad you're on the panel. Thanks for the shout out for Brunetta Howell-Barrett. She's also an amazing LGBTQ ally.
She is, yeah.
I'm working on a celebration of the first openly black gay contingent to appear in the Bud Billiken Parade. That happened 30 years ago, and yet that's a history that not many people know about. It's happening tomorrow. I have flyers. But my question is primarily towards the History Museum and the Public Library. What steps are you taking to make sure that your collections are more inclusive of not only LGBTQ history, but the communities within that community whose stories get overlooked and whose history, unfortunately, gets lost when they die, or their mementos aren't kept by family members who don't realize the significance of that history?
I can start. I can speak to that question in kind of 2 ways. One in the AKEY project, collections are a huge part of that effort. And that does mean, like I said, things like mining the archive, seeing there probably are things we're just not recognizing. Institutions as old and large as us suffer tremendously from a word called metadata, which is lack of known information about your objects. And so that also could be considered job security, because that means there's a lot of research to do. And there's a lot of things to uncover. And so, that is the work we try to do with interns. But it does also mean intentionally saying we need to kind of put our money where our mouth is and build those bridges to bring new things in. And so AKEY is in the process of that. So the exhibition has a combination of things from our own work. It has things that have been acquired through the process, and then things that are loaned by community members. And so a lot of our exhibitions do that, where they have objects come in that help tell that story of that person, and then it goes back to them. So we're co-storying it just for that moment, as opposed to in an ongoing fashion. And then in my own work as the curator of religion community history, I oversee an initiative called Chicago Sacred, and that initiative looks at the totality of our collections and its ability to tell community stories across a huge spreadsheet, let me tell you, huge spreadsheet of intersectional identities. And so that's also an initiative, not something I am ever gonna claim will have an end date, but is something that I hope helps us continue to refine how we're thinking about those processes.
For CPL, particularly the harsh, is again identifying the stories that are not told, and the LGBTQIA+ community is not well represented in our collections. It's not. There's various reasons for that, but what I can say is that's even sometimes at the request in like the deed of gift of family members or whoever deposited the materials. So that's an aspect of the work that people may not understand or realize happens, that if a collection comes into a repository and it's, while yes, it becomes, again, a city asset, we don't necessarily hold copyright or anything to it, but, there could be written in the deed of gift that this aspect of their life cannot be told. And so we actually have had that in the collection. However, part of the work is to collect and to identify those silences and what collections can meet not only the larger collection scope, but also will fill in the gaps. And so we are mining our collections. We are looking within our collections to see, again, what aspects of various histories are not pronounced and that can be pronounced and should be pronounced. It's also a matter of going back into the metadata and enriching them. In fact, we also are the recipient of a second grant. The Getty has given us a grant, has awarded us a grant, particularly around Black art history, and that funds 3 fellows to do research of our already processed collections, to pull out more of those histories, and so we can enhance our metadata. And we are particularly looking at the Black Renaissance era. And so some of those stories do include creators who later on history has shown, evidence has shown that they identified as LGBTQ. So as that information is, again, is shown in the records, we will do the work of enhancing that metadata. And again, it's really about being mindful of and letting folks know that we are a space that's inclusive of all the history. So I've been at CPL since 2021, and there's been interesting conversations that I've had with folks who have already had established relationships with the collection and who are interested. And that has been one area that has become a bit more, aware, has some more awareness in discussions. And I'm currently in discussion with, with someone who is interested in depositing a collection that's very much a part of their history. So it's a slow drip, but a slow drip consistently can break down the mountain, right? So it's just getting started, doing the work. Well said. Oh.
We're gonna, thank you. The folks in the back couldn't hear you, so I'm just gonna say, since we don't have the microphone anymore, that one of the protesters has unboxed part of their collection. So that is something hopefully we can talk about in the future as a success story. I think there was another question that, yes, go ahead.
Thank you. I was just wondering, how can regular people, especially younger people, preserve their culture in the face of gentrification?
So if you all heard, how can people preserve their culture in the face of gentrification? So.
Yes, do it. That's, so, and I'm sorry, I just kind of jumped in, but because I mean, what people really need to understand is that when folks come into communities and sometimes even tout that there's a particular good of this, of developing, having some type of development, a new building or what have you, and oftentimes don't connect with the community, one of the first things to go is the cultural capital of that community, the cultural capital that made that community vibrant and even was, a part of supporting income and revenue of that community. So it is important and critical to do that, and especially getting young folks involved. Again, take advantage of the technologies that you have. Young folks are taking pictures anyway. Take a picture of what's going on in your community and start to label them. Start to, identify, again, really pull that stuff off your devices and start to just simply label them, what this space is, because you may have the only photo in 10 years that, said, hey, this place existed. And I'm even speaking from personal experience how there were things in the community. I grew up in Austin, and I'm still a resident of Austin, and there are things and activities and places and spaces that were in existence when I was young, and they're not there anymore. And so, and then also too, as far as, you, with your project too, it's so important, and that's one thing, that's an area of the archive that's kind of silenced too. Young people's voices are not well represented in various archival repositories, including in the Harsh. And so being very intentional of saying young people have a history too. They are contributors to the community. Many resources and services are developed for their engagement, and so making sure that we document that, and also connecting with organizations in resources of the city, like CPL, have the U Media centers in various branches, and they have audio-visual equipment that can be used by the youth there. You could do various things. There's studios that if folks wanted to, they could develop a podcast. They can research the archives and talk about it on a podcast or something, develop their own program. There's many ways, and I know this kind of went from this micro thing very, very macro, but get started and do it and use the resources and tools you have readily available.
And I just would like to add very quickly that thank you for that question, because this is oftentimes a conversation in historic preservation as well, is do the tools that we have actually prevent the displacement of people who made the community what it is? Mm-hmm. And I remember a conversation with regard to the Pilsen Historic District a number of years ago, where a young woman stood up and said, what is Pilsen without us? What is Pilsen without the Mexican American community? What are you preserving if we're not here? Yeah. And I think that was a vital question to be asking as far as what the tools do and do not do, and how we can do a better job of exploring, and this is research that I am doing, people's right to place, because it's really, real estate law is what controls place, but what about people's right to their own history as well? So I just want to say, I think that's an area for exploration in human rights law as well. Let's see, we're going to move this side. Ma'am in the pink, in the pink jacket.
Hi, I have been blessed to have a father-in-law who turned 99 in October, and he has been all of his life, still till today, actively involved in fraternal organizations. And he made up all the way up the line in one of the fraternal organizations he's been a part of, and has literally thousands of data, information, photographs. And, we want to plan for a day when he is not here and all that stuff has to go somewhere. How would we be able potentially to donate it to an organization that would preserve it, because it does capture a particular point in time in the Chicago history and a fraternal history that may be valuable for future people to look at, to say what at a particular point in time people were engaged in?
I can try. We haven't spoken, but maybe it was alluded to. The idea of oral history is so critical to public history work, and that is the literal time of just listening to somebody's story and recording it for future generations. And I cannot emphasize enough how much wisdom you learn just from taking the time to sit with somebody for a couple hours and build a relationship over that. And so that's a really easy tool too, because we have voice memos on our phone. And if the answer is more specific, that's usually getting in touch with somebody like Raquel, who walks you through the process in terms of how you assign that.
Yeah, and so I'm only speaking for our repository for CPL. Well, one, as a community member, I would suggest you look at various organizations. Although we are a repository that focuses on the Black experience in Chicago and throughout the state, that doesn't necessarily deem us to be the best place, because lots of logistical things go into that decision too, like depending on how large the collection is, do we have the space? And one thing that we have implemented at my organization to ensure that we are being good stewards of the materials that we have and that will come in is that can we process it within 2 to 3 years? If it's something that's so large and we don't have the resources to do so, that doesn't necessarily mean we may not want it, but it may not be the best place for your needs, because you may want something that's more publicly and readily available sooner. And then also too, it's a whole process of surveying the materials and all that good stuff. Is it something that we can share publicly? If it's something that we cannot make publicly available, we may not be the right organization. And so it's just a matter of contacting various organizations and making comparisons and what will work best for your family and the history that's being preserved and that, again, will want made readily available to the public.
We may have one very quick question. We'll try to answer it as quickly as possible. So is there somebody who has a quick, yes? Get the microphone coming there for you.
Hi, I'm LaShawn Brown. I'm in the South Shore community, and once upon a time we had a South Shore Historic Society. And right now our archives are housed at the Chicago Historical Society, which is wonderful. And what we've been doing in the community, the organization dissolved in the early 2000s, and some people in the community got together and we decided to hold on to the name by title so that we can at least make sure that when we control the narrative from within the community, and we are seeking community members who would have the time to be stewards of this. How do we look into potential templates, some best practices, so that we are definitely not trying to reinvent the wheel on how to get this ball rolling, get our historical society back on, as well as, and one of the things that's really important for us in South Shore with architecture and the rich, rich history that we have, is to also be able to host tours and things like that, historic tours. So how do we tap into some resources so that we can utilize some templates, some best practices, et cetera?
So we have time. Very quick. Who wants to take that and answer it as quickly as possible?
You want to speak?
Victor?
I'm probably not the best person to ask about that, but I do think that there are still a number of active community resources, and what I would probably do is talk to sort of compatriot organizations that are still active and look at the key things that they have brought to bear, because you might still be able to maintain what you've got along a framework that can actually eventually be expanded upon should the whole process really kind of resuscitate and people come together and decide to really make the organization come back to life. And so I would look at the ones that still exist and see what they have done and model how you keep yourselves organized from that point forward, because that's the only way you're going to be able to still control the narrative of the area.
So if you were not able to ask your question, please feel free to come up and ask us, but we need to conclude. I would like to thank our panelists, Victor, Raquel, and Rebekah. Would you please give them a round of applause?